So outside of actually calling the NBA trading deadline this year pure insanity, as far as I'm concerned, this was like watching a 5-day version of the movie John Wick. Every time I turned around, somebody was actually getting shot and then shipped off to another team. It was in truly pure insanity. If you're wondering, Boban, who was in a John Wick flick, is no longer in the NBA. He's actually playing overseas, and at the time of this recording, he has not been traded back to the NBA. So we're going to get into the big trades. Yeah, we'll talk about the trade herd around the world. We'll also talk about Mark Williams suddenly being a Los Angeles Laker, which happened in the dead of the night. We'll get into AD in Dallas. We'll talk about De'Aaron with good old Wemby in San Antonio. I'll tell you why Zach LaVine might not actually work out in Sacramento. We'll get into Chris Middleton, who is actually hanging out in the NBA version of Siberia as he got shipped off to the Washington Wizards. Kyle Kuzma, well, I've got some serious thoughts on why that was a bad move for the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll talk, as I mentioned, about Jimmy Butler and whether or not he's a better fit with this Golden State Warriors team than Wiggins was. And then Brandon Ingram has been shipped off to Toronto so that the Raptors can find a way to overpay him next year. Got all of that, and trust me, a whole lot more coming up on this very special edition of the NBA Rundown. Okay, so let's get into it. So I want to start where we should start, right, which is with the trade heard around the world, the Luka Dončić trade to the Los Angeles Lakers. Luka has now been pushed back to Monday night, so he'll most likely play for the Lakers on Monday night, which is a home game for him. The original plan was to have Luka actually play on Saturday night, but his 5-on-5 practice, which was supposed to happen today, did not happen. So that's actually why it's actually getting pushed back, at least according to the reports coming out of LA. Now, for the Los Angeles Lakers, of course, this was a fantastic deal. And then they sprinkle in a little young center and Mark Williams in the middle of the night last night, and good old Rob Pelinka, who looks a lot like Rob Lowe, actually did a really good job at the trading deadline this year. You know, for all of those people that are talking about Luka and his weight, and talking about Luka maybe not showing up to practice enough and not putting in enough time and all that stuff, I say to you all, well, for God's sakes, he took his team all the way to the NBA Finals last year. I have to say, I believe that Luka absolutely, probably, sure, he could maybe eat a little better and work out a little bit more, but outside of that, Luka is already one of the top 4 players in the world at this point. So in terms of the moves for the Los Angeles Lakers, they went from old to young. Now, I didn't love the fact that they had to give up Dalton Knecht. I didn't really worry so much about Cam Reddish getting shipped off. He was really in JJ Redick's doghouse over the last couple months anyways. So that's the one part of this, but Mark Williams is theoretically going to be a good rim protector on the defensive side of the ball. However, if you've watched any of his tape, a lot of that at this point is theoretical. So it is definitely going to be something that JJ Redick and the coaching staff are going to have to spend some time with Mark Williams on, because he does get lost a little bit on the defensive side of the ball. But on the offensive side, he's certainly good. He can rebound really well. He'll fit in nicely with this team, and he's young. So we'll have to see how it all ultimately plays out. But it was a great move by the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, in terms of Anthony Davis fitting in with the Dallas Mavericks, of course he's going to fit in with the Dallas Mavericks. And I think if you're Nico Harrison, you know, you're really your head is on a stake if this team doesn't at least go to the NBA Finals this year. And we just all know how competitive everything is. I really want to wait and see how this all pans out for Anthony Davis with the Dallas Mavericks. I believe Anthony Davis is actually going to continue to do what he's been doing. He's like 25-12 every night. He's a fantastic player and did a great job with the Los Angeles Lakers while he was there. I think he's often one of the most underrated centers actually in the NBA, even though I know he'd prefer to play the 4 most of the time. I still absolutely love Anthony Davis's fit with a Kyrie Irving, a Dante Exum, a Daniel Gafford, a PJ Washington. And the reason I bring up Dante Exum is just simply to say he's back from injury now, and he'll fit in well as Max Christie, who is also part of that trade. You know, in the NBA, sometimes it takes basketball players a while before the switch actually flips. It's like in the NFL, a quarterback, it can take them a while to actually figure out how to slow down the defenses. In other words, how to slow down the game. Same thing can be said in the association, and you can tell. I've seen just about every Laker game that Max Christie played in, and I can tell you the switch has absolutely been turned on there. So that is also a good pick up for the Dallas Mavericks. So I think ultimately this is one of those trades, believe it or not, where both teams can win in the short term. In terms of the long term, I think, you're talking about Luka Dončić, who's basically an icon around the rest of the world. So I think the Lakers will ultimately win the long-term portion of this deal. So De'Aaron Fox played in his first game with the Spurs last night, looked great. I think we all can agree that De'Aaron Fox with Wemby makes a lot of sense. Zach LaVine to Sacramento. I know the Sacramento Kings are no longer run by Vlade Divac, but at times it feels as if Vlade Divac has a hot line into the management team of the Sacramento Kings. I would have loved this trade for the Sacramento Kings 4 or 5 years ago. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work out now, so we'll just have to wait and see. This is probably going to take a little time, and once they figure it out, will they have enough time to actually make a serious run at the playoffs? I think maybe this is a good deal for the Sacramento Kings at some point next year. I'm just not sure exactly how it's going to work out in the short term. Elsewhere, we have Kyle Kuzma was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. The Washington Wizards wisely got Chris Middleton and A.J. Johnson. Both of those players are now hanging out in the NBA version of Siberia, playing for the Washington Wizards. Look, I'm sure Chris Middleton will be moved at some point. This is just simply I've always loved Chris Middleton's game, but his body has broken down to the point where you just can't be paying him that kind of money for a broken down body. And I love what the Wizards have sort of been doing for the most part, which is picking up a bunch of young talent. A.J. Johnson, in the few minutes I've seen him play, actually looks pretty good. So we'll just have to wait and see how that all plays out. In terms of the Milwaukee Bucks getting Kyle Kuzma, I used to be a huge Kyle Kuzma fan. But I have to say, over the last 24 months, I've become very sour on Kyle Kuzma's game. And if you have some a chance, and you can actually find some footage of Kyle Kuzma playing extensive minutes for the Washington Wizards from this year, you should take a look at it. Look, Kyle Kuzma had absolutely done what people like to call the proverbial phoning it in. You could tell that Kyle Kuzma didn't really want to be on the court. Now, I'm sure there's a million other people in the world who would love the opportunity to get paid what Kyle's actually getting paid to play in the NBA. So a little bit of effort would have gone a long way in me having a different opinion about Kyle Kuzma ending up with the Milwaukee Bucks at this point. Now, if Doc Rivers is actually able to get the old Kyle Kuzma to show up for at least 3/4 of the games that he actually plays in, then this trade will have been worth it. It's just a question of whether or not that old Kyle Kuzma is still in there, and can those bad habits that he obviously developed playing for the Wizards, can he find a way to wipe those away from essentially his hard drive? All right, so we're going to talk super quick about the Brandon Ingram trade. Ingram to the Raptors. I made a joke about this earlier, but the Raptors will most likely look forward to giving him way too much money next year when his contract actually comes up. It's an expiring contract. For the Raptors, it's interesting. I think we'll just have to wait and see how all of these pieces work together. But Brandon Ingram is somebody who I also really like from a basketball perspective. I think he's a solid player. It's just a question of how much are you going to have to spend to keep Brandon Ingram on your team, and are you really getting the kind of value out of him that you expect to get at this point? And then, of course, the other big trade that went down during this trading deadline, and no, I'm not talking about the Marcus Smart trade, which sent him to the NBA version of Siberia. That's right, folks. Marcus Smart, now a proud member of the Washington Wizards as well. I got to believe some of these guys are going to get bought out at some point. So Jimmy Butler to the Golden State Warriors. The deal went down last night right before tip-off of the Golden State Warriors game. There's some footage of Wiggins and a couple of the other players actually on the court during warmups, being pulled off of the court for a meeting with Steve Kerr with no reporters or media allowed in the room. At which point Wiggins finds out that he's been shipped off to the Miami Heat. A horrible way for it all to go down for everybody. And Steve Kerr came out last night and said, well, maybe we need to move this NBA trading deadline back to the All-Star weekend. And I thought about that for a second. I've heard some other people actually mention this. And ask yourself this question: when has there been a Super Bowl week where the NBA has actually dominated the headlines? And the answer to that question is it's never, ever happened before. Look, I think Adam Silver would be a fool to move it away from Super Bowl week. This has absolutely panned out for the NBA in a big way. I didn't think I'd ever say this, but the NBA has actually been stealing thunder, at least, from the National Football League Super Bowl week. It's hard to believe, but true. Now, as we get into the rest of the week, I'm sure the NFL will circle the wagon and begin to dominate once again, as it always does. In terms of Jimmy Butler fitting in with Steph Curry and Draymond Green and some of the other pieces that they have left on this team, I think it's sort of safe to say that in the short term, I think certainly that is a strong possibility. I've always loved Jimmy Butler's game. The biggest problem with Jimmy is, are you getting playoff Jimmy or are you getting drama Jimmy? If you talk to any of the real Golden State Warriors fans, those people that are part of Dub Nation, they will probably, if you got them in a moment of honesty, tell you that they are a little bit skeptical. And one of the reasons, of course, they're skeptical of all of this is simply because drama Jimmy reared its ugly head throughout most of this season with the Miami Heat. And that's just not how the Golden State Warriors organization runs. So from a basketball perspective, you're talking about Andrew Wiggins going to the Miami Heat, and then of course the Warriors gave up a bunch of other pieces that probably weren't going to get a lot of playing time anyways. And they shipped those pieces off as part of this deal. Dennis Schroeder's been traded 4 times in the last 24 hours. That must be some sort of NBA record. Kyle Anderson is gone, and Lindy Waters as well. Look, it would be really easy for me to sit here and say, I don't like this deal. And it would also be really easy for me to sit here and say, I absolutely love this deal. The truth of the matter is we are going to have to wait and see how this deal actually truly pans out for the Golden State Warriors. Now, Jimmy Butler and Andrew Wiggins are pretty much the same height. They've got sort of like different styles of basketball. And we know that Jimmy certainly can be a very clutch player at times. So I think if we see playoff Jimmy actually show up and play for the Golden State Warriors, then this will have been worth it. If for some reason the Warriors miss the playoffs entirely, I'm talking about not even making the play-in, I wouldn't be surprised if we got drama Jimmy this upcoming offseason. And certainly that's not what you want to spend a 2-year, $111 to $121 million contract extension on. Different numbers have been repeated, 121 for 2 years or 111. So call it whatever it is, it's still a lot of money. And it also puts the Golden State Warriors in an awkward position when it comes to having to re-sign Jonathan Kuminga. It's almost as if they're going to have to go to their top 3 players, Steph Curry and Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler, and ask for some cash back to make sure they have enough cash to actually pay Jonathan Kuminga what he's actually going to be worth on the open market. All right, so those are the big deals and my thoughts on all of it. I don't think the Jimmy Butler deal actually puts the Warriors over the top or anything like that. But, like some of the great players in the NBA, when they sort of, start to wind down their careers, a lot of times they have 1 or 2 more great runs in them. And I wouldn't put anything past Steph Curry from a playoff series perspective. I could absolutely see Steph Curry getting hot in a playoff series and finding a way for the Warriors to actually win at least one series in the playoffs with Jimmy Butler there. Beyond all of that, it is just so competitive around the rest of the Western Conference. So we will just have to wait and see also how the spacing all works and how the ball movement works. And, Jimmy Butler's not necessarily a ball hog, but he is going to have to, we're just going to have to see how he fits into the flow of the offense that Steph Curry and Draymond Green and Steve Kerr have been running throughout the Warriors dynasty run, which of course the dynasty is over, but we still have some remnants of it left. In terms of some other trades that did go down today, DeAndre Hunter has been shipped off John Wick style to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Hawks receive Karis LeVert, who I've always liked, George Niang, who's a solid basketball player, 3 second-round picks, and 2 pick swaps. And then finally, I want to report that Nurkic has been shipped off to the Hornets in exchange for that. Cody Martin and Vasily Mysick are with the Suns. Actually, both of those are pretty good basketball players, so it will be interesting to see how they fit in with the clubhouse there, or the locker room there in Phoenix, which has reportedly been a bit of a mess over the last couple weeks. So we'll have to see if there's a players-only meeting with the Phoenix Suns to get everybody back on track. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. That's my big rundown. New to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe, and of course like this video for the NBA Rundown. I am Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.